It was 3:14 in the morning when I realized he hadn't moved in 40 minutes. My name is Caleb. I was 26. I'd been working the overnight shift at a pilot travel center off Route 30 in central Pennsylvania for about 8 months. 4 pumps, a narrow convenience store, a single unisex bathroom around the side. Breezewood was 11 miles east. By 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, I'd already gone 2 hours without a single customer. I noticed him around 2:30. He pulled in off the highway in an older Chevy Tahoe, dark green, maybe black, hard to tell under the lot lights. He didn't pull up to a pump. He parked off to the side, near the edge where the light doesn't quite reach. Engine running, just sat there. I figured he was on his phone. People do that sometimes. Pull off, rest 20 minutes, disappear again. I didn't think much of it. Then he got out. He walked to pump 6, the last pump on the far end, and stood next to it. Didn't pick up the nozzle, didn't swipe a card, just stood there with his arms at his sides, facing the store. Facing me. I was the only one working. My manager, Dale, had left at midnight. It was just me, the cameras, and whatever was standing in that parking lot. I watched him through the glass. He was tall, dark jacket. I couldn't make out his face clearly from that distance, but his posture was wrong. People standing at a pump are always doing something, checking their phone, looking at the price screen. He was just standing still. His arms weren't crossed against the cold. He wasn't shifting his weight the way a person does when the night air is biting at them after hours in a car. He was simply there the way a fence post is there. I noticed, without quite meaning to, that I couldn't see his breath fogging in the cold. After about 10 minutes, I told myself to relax, probably just needed some air. Long drive. I went back to restocking the coffee station. When I looked up again, he still hadn't moved. Around 2:50, he walked into the store. The door chimed. I straightened up behind the counter and gave him the standard nod. He came up to the register slowly, looking at the shelves on either side as he walked, like someone who'd never been in a store before. He picked up a bag of chips near the front, carried it to the counter. He put it down and looked at me. He was somewhere in his 40s, clean-shaven, dark canvas work coat, the kind that could have come from any hardware store in any county in the state. There was nothing distinctive about him, which was itself distinctive. I had the quiet, uncomfortable feeling that if someone asked me to describe him an hour later, I would have struggled. He said, "How far is Altoona from here?" I told him about 30 miles west on 22. He didn't react, just kept looking at me. Then he said, "Not this road, the other one." I didn't know what to say to that. There is no other road that cuts straight to Altoona from Route 30, not without going well out of your way. I told him I wasn't sure about another route, rang up his chips, and told him the total, $1.89. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a fistful of change, set it on the counter and counted it out. Exact change, that happens. What doesn't happen is what came next. He counted it once, pushed it toward me, then pulled it back and counted it again. Then a third time. His lips moved, but he didn't make a sound. The coins were cold, colder than they should have been, colder than hands that had just come in from a 38-degree night, like they'd been sitting in a cooler. He left the coins on the counter and walked out without the chips. I watched him through the window. He went back to pump 6, same spot, same posture, arms at his sides, facing me. I tried calling Dale. The call didn't go through, fast busy signal, the kind I hadn't heard in years. I tried again, same thing, full bars on my phone. I tried texting, the messages just sat there. I found the store's landline under the counter. There was a dial tone. I felt better for about 3 seconds. Then I dialed 911 and got a recording. Not an operator, a recording. It said all lines were busy and to stay on the line. At 3 in the morning in Breezewood, Pennsylvania, all 911 lines were busy. I hung up and looked out at pump 6. He was still there. The mist had thickened slightly. It came up around his ankles. He didn't seem to notice. A white Freightliner had pulled into the trucker spaces on the far side of the lot while I was on the phone. The driver hadn't come in. I was glad he was there. It felt like less of nothing. I tried 911 again, another recording. Around 3:20, a second car pulled into the lot. Tan Nissan pickup, maybe 15 years old, chrome strip missing along the passenger door. It didn't go to the pumps. It parked about 2 spaces down from the Tahoe, same edge of the lot, same fringe of dark. The driver stayed inside. 2 of them now. I went cold. I stood behind the register and made myself think clearly. There was a panic button under the counter, a direct line to the county dispatcher that bypassed 911. I'd never used it. I reached down and found it with my fingers but didn't press it yet. I wanted to be sure. or maybe I wanted 30 more seconds of being wrong about what I was looking at. The man from Pump 6 started walking back toward the store. He came in slower this time. The door chimed. He walked straight to the counter and put both hands flat on the glass and looked at me. He said, "Is there someone in the back?" I said no. He said it again, same volume, same flat tone, like he hadn't heard himself the first time. "Is there someone in the back?" Not a question, no rise at the end, nothing. The fluorescent tube above the register had been flickering faintly all night, the kind of slow pulse you stop registering after the first hour. I was registering it now. I could hear it ticking. I could smell the cold coming off his jacket, something underneath it I couldn't place, not unpleasant, just wrong. That was the moment I knew, not suspected, knew. I pressed the panic button. A small click under the counter, nothing else. I kept my face flat and told him no, just me tonight. He looked at me for a long moment, then his gaze moved past me to the stockroom door behind the counter, slow, deliberate, and it held there. He didn't look back at me. He just stared at that door the way you stare at something you've already decided you're going to do. He started walking toward the end of the counter, toward the little swinging gate that leads behind the register. I grabbed the steel road bar we kept back there, about 18 inches long. I put it on top of the counter where he could see it. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He stopped. We looked at each other for a long time, long enough for the freezer cases to cycle through a full hum and settle, long enough for a truck to pass on Route 30 and fade out completely, long enough that I became aware of my own breathing and had to slow it down. Then the Freightliner driver came in. Big guy, late 50s, Carhartt jacket, coffee thermos in his hand. He came through the door talking before he even looked up. "Y'all got those breakfast sandwiches this early, or I gotta wait till 5. The man at the counter didn't turn around. He just stepped back, slowly, like something was reeling him in. He walked to the door, pushed it open, and went back out to the lot. I watched through the window. He got in the Tahoe. The tan Nissan pulled out right after, like they'd been on the same signal. Both vehicles turned right onto Route 30 heading west. No hesitation at the exit, no brake lights, like they knew exactly where they were going and had only stopped here to confirm something first. The trucker was still talking about the breakfast sandwiches. I told him they started at 5. My voice came out pretty steady. He poured a coffee and left. I sat down on the floor behind the counter and stayed there for about 10 minutes before I got up. 2 county sheriff's deputies arrived around 3:50. The panic button had gone through after all. I told them everything, the Tahoe, the Nissan, the question about the back room, the way the second car had parked, the coins that were too cold, the question he asked twice without meaning it as a question. One deputy nodded a lot, the other wrote things down and didn't say much. Before they left, the quieter one told me they'd had a similar report from a truck stop about 40 miles west 3 nights earlier. A man fitting the same description, same behavior. That station had a clerk working alone too. Nothing had happened there either. Nothing happened stuck with me. Because something was clearly supposed to. I put in my 2 weeks the following Monday. In the daylight, I drove back past the station on my way home. The lot looked like nothing. Pale concrete pump islands, light poles standing there doing nothing. A family in a minivan was filling up at pump 2. A kid pressed his face against the car window and fogged the glass. I looked at pump 6 for a moment before I drove on. The car had been behind me for 60 miles, and it hadn't touched its brakes once. I drive a 2019 Kenworth T680. Flatbed mostly. I run a regular loop out of Columbus, Ohio, hauling steel coil down through Indiana and back. It's a living, not a glamorous one, but it's mine. That particular Thursday, I was deadheading home. Empty trailer, no load to rush to, just trying to get back before sunrise. It was just past midnight. I'd left a truck stop off I-70 outside Indianapolis about 40 minutes earlier. The next fuel on my route was a Pilot in Terre Haute, roughly 30 miles out. I wasn't worried about fuel. I wasn't worried about anything. That's usually when something happens. I noticed the headlights because of how they sat. Most passenger cars have a certain spread between the beams. These lights were tighter, narrow, almost like a motorcycle, but the height was wrong for a bike, too high. And they were close, not tailgating close, but closer than you want at midnight on an empty interstate. I moved to the left lane to let them pass. They moved left. I drifted back right. They drifted right. I told myself it was just drafting. Some guys in passenger cars will sit behind a semi and ride the wind's shadow to save gas. Annoying, but it happens. I wrote it off. Then we hit the exit for Plainfield. There's nothing out there at midnight. A Casey's, a couple of fast food places already dark. Nobody exits there at 12:15 in the morning. Nobody turned off. The lights stayed. I keyed my CB, channel 19. Asked if anybody was westbound on the 70 around mile marker 66. Static, then a voice came back, raspy, older guy. He said he was eastbound, about 10 miles ahead, just crossed over. He asked why. I told him I had a car sitting in my mirrors, and it was making me uneasy. He went quiet for a second, then he said, "What kind of lights, wide or narrow?" I said narrow, tight together. He didn't say anything for about 5 seconds. Then he said, "Pull into the pilot in Terre Haute and wait inside. Don't stop before that." I asked him what he knew about it. He clicked off, nothing after that. I tried him twice more, no answer. I'm not a man who spooks easy. I've been doing this run for 6 years. I know road weird. I've had drunk drivers weave under my trailer, had a man stop dead in the left lane at 2 in the morning for no reason anyone could explain. I know what strange looks like out here. This was different. I watched those lights for the next 20 minutes. Every small move I made, they matched it, not instantly. There was a delay, like whoever was driving was watching me first, then deciding. I slowed from 68 to 58. They slowed. I crept back up to 72. They came with me. I passed the Terre Haute exit. I pulled into the pilot. I took a space near the building, close to where 3 other trucks were staged. I left the engine running and watched my mirrors. The car didn't pull in. It sat at the edge of the lot entrance, just sat there idling. I couldn't make out a color in the dark. Then the lights went off, which was worse. A parked car with no lights at the entrance of a truck stop at 12:40 in the morning is not something you explain away. I went inside, bought a large coffee and a pack of peanut butter crackers and stood near the window where I could see the lot. The woman at the register was watching something on her phone. She didn't notice me standing there. The car hadn't moved. I waited 15 minutes, then I went to the trucker's lounge in the back and asked a guy filling out his logbook if he'd seen the car out front. He walked up and looked, said he hadn't noticed it pull in. We stood there together for a minute. He said, "You got a dash cam?" I did, a Garmin 67W, front and rear facing. I told him I'd pull the footage when I got home. He nodded, went back to his logbook. He wasn't scared, but he wasn't dismissing it either. There's a code among truckers. You don't tell a man he's imagining something on the road. I went back out after about 20 minutes. The car was gone. I sat in the cab for a minute. I called my dispatcher, Marcus. No answer. It was 1 in the morning. I left him a voicemail with my location and the gist of what had happened. I don't know exactly why. It just felt right to have a record somewhere. I pulled back onto I-70 westbound. For about 8 miles, nothing, just the road, a few eastbound semis, open lanes. I started feeling a little stupid. Started telling myself the trucker on the radio was some bored guy messing with me. Started building a rational story. Then the lights were back. Same position, same narrow gap, same height, already matching my speed, like they'd been waiting just past the pilot lot and fell in behind me the moment I passed. I went cold. I grabbed the CB, channel 19. I said I was westbound at mile marker 11. I had a tail that was not behaving right, and I needed another set of eyes. A woman's voice came back, a driver I'd never spoken to before. Her handle was Lake Effect. She said she was about 4 miles behind me and would speed up to close the gap. Then she said, "Describe the lights again." I described them: tight, high, no front plate visible in my rear cam feed. She was quiet for a second, then she said, "I see them, I see you both." She said it was a dark-colored sedan. She couldn't make the model, no front plate, rear plate obscured, and one headlight was slightly misaligned, aimed inward like it had been hit or bent. Then she said, "It's slowing down, it's dropping back toward me now." I watched my mirrors, the lights shrank, then they stopped shrinking, and I understood what was happening. It had noticed her. It was settling into the gap between my truck and hers, just sitting there in the middle of us, like it was deciding. I told her to keep her doors locked and not to stop. She said, "I'm calling 911. I said, "Do it." I kept driving. The lights held their new position in my mirror, about a half-mile back, sitting almost equidistant between us, like it was content there, like the middle was exactly where it wanted to be. We crossed into Illinois. I got off at the first exit with a sign for a state police post. There was a Casey's right off the ramp with the lights on inside. I pulled in with my four ways going. 30 seconds later, Lake Effect's rig rolled in behind me. She parked nose to tail with mine and didn't get out right away. The dark sedan did not follow us off the ramp. I watched the overpass. I watched the on-ramp. Nothing came. She climbed down from her cab. She was in her 40s, short hair, looked like she hadn't slept well before the drive even started. She walked to my window and I rolled it down. She said that car turned its lights off when it passed the exit. I watched it. It kept going on the interstate, but it went completely dark for about a quarter mile. I didn't have a response to that. We went into the Casey's and I called 911 from the landline near the register, explained the situation. The dispatcher took the report and said she'd pass it to the Illinois State Police and to Indiana State on the off chance the car came back around. About 20 minutes later, a trooper came by, young guy, maybe late 20s. He took down my description and asked about footage. I showed him the rear dashcam screen. The lights were there, two tight white dots, steady, never flaring. He couldn't make a plate either. He said they'd had 3 calls in the past 6 weeks about a vehicle matching that description on the I-70 corridor. 2 from truckers. 1 from a family in a minivan who said the car had followed them for over an hour and only broke off when the husband started filming through the rear window near the Indiana-Illinois line. He said they hadn't been able to identify it. He said whoever was driving knew the road, knew where cameras were and where they weren't. I asked him what they thought the person wanted. He looked at me like he was deciding how much to say. Then he said, "We don't know, but nobody's been hurt yet." Yet. Lake Effect and I drove the rest of the route in a loose convoy. Her exit came before mine. When she got off, she clicked the CB and said to get home safe. I told her the same. I pulled into my yard outside Columbus at 4:17 in the morning. I sat in the cab for a minute after the engine went quiet. My hands were steady. I wasn't shaking, but I felt scraped out, like something had been looking at me for 3 hours straight and I hadn't been able to look back. I pulled the dashcam footage the next morning. The lights were there the whole time, clear as anything. I sent the files to the trooper's email address, the one he'd written on his card. I never heard back about whether they found the car. Marcus called around 8 in the morning and listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, he just said, "Take the day." I did. I still run that loop, same truck, same route, same hours. You can't stop driving because of one night, but I keep the CB on now, all the time, channel 19, volume up. And I watch for lights that sit too narrow in the mirror. The road at 1 in the morning has its own rules. The first one is this: you are not as alone as you think you are, and that is not always a comfort. I still flinch when a PA clicks on. That reflex started the morning. A voice came over the intercom at Garfield Hollow High School that was not the voice that was supposed to be there. I want to be clear about that part. I'd heard Mrs. Alderman over that PA every morning for 3 years. I knew her voice. This was not her. This happened in November of my junior year at a small rural high school in western Pennsylvania, right off Route 208. Single building, maybe 800 students. The kind of place where you know the janitor by name and the principal brings donuts on the last Friday of every month. It had been a cold November. Frozen mud in the parking lot, dead corn stubble in the fields across the road. The sky that morning was flat gray and low, and the forecast called for flurries by afternoon. I was in AP Chemistry, second period, Mr. Devlin's class, room 114, ground floor, east wing. He had just turned to write something on the board. I was in the 3rd row, copying an equation I didn't understand. Then the PA clicked on. The pause before the voice was too long, 4 seconds, maybe 5. Mrs. Alderman always spoke within 1 second of the click. This pause just sat there, open and humming with static, the way a phone call sounds when the person on the other end is listening before they decide to speak. Then, "Attention staff, we are initiating a code yellow. Please secure your rooms." Code yellow. I looked at my friend Marcus across the aisle. He was already looking at me. That wasn't our school's code. We used colors, but yellow wasn't one of them. Green for shelter-in-place drills, red for full lockdown. I had been a student there since 9th grade, and I had never once heard code yellow come over that intercom. Mr. Devlin heard it too. He set his marker down slowly. He walked to the classroom door without saying anything and turned the deadbolt. The bolt made a solid chunk that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Then he went to the window and pulled the cord on the blinds without looking at us. He did it the way you do something when you don't want to answer questions about it. "Phones away," he said quietly. "Move to the back of the room." Something in his voice made everybody move without arguing. That was the first thing I knew. Mr. Devlin was the kind of teacher who explained everything. He did not give instructions without reasons. He was giving us instructions without reasons. We pushed to the back wall between the lab benches and the emergency eyewash station. 22 kids crouching or sitting on the floor. Nobody was talking. The linoleum back there was cold through my jeans. I noticed the way you notice irrelevant things when your brain is trying to stay calm, a crack running across 2 tiles near the base of the bench, old and dark with grime. I checked my phone, 10:19 a.m. For a few minutes nothing happened. The school went quiet the way it only does during lockdowns, that specific absence of hallway noise you don't register until it's gone. No lockers, no sneakers on tile, no distant teacher's voice bleeding through a wall, just the heating vent above the door ticking the way it always did when the system cycled on, 22 people trying to breathe quietly. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not running, not urgent, slow and uneven, like someone who wasn't in a hurry or wasn't sure where they were going. They passed our door, then they stopped. I was watching the narrow vertical window set into the door, 4 inches wide maybe, reinforced glass with wire mesh inside it. From the back wall I could only see a slice of the hallway, a section of cinder block painted beige, the edge of a fire extinguisher mount, a strip of scuffed floor. Nothing moved in that window for almost a full minute. The vent ticked. Somewhere near me I could hear someone's breath coming in short, controlled pulls. Someone working hard not to make noise. The room felt too warm, the specific, trapped warmth of a space that has been sealed. Then my phone buzzed, a text from my mom. "Are you okay? Something's happening at your school." I stared at that. It was 10:23 in the morning. She worked 40 minutes away at a dental office in Slippery Rock. The school hadn't sent a parent notification. The system always pushed an alert, and I hadn't gotten one. So how did she know? I didn't text back. Mr. Devlin had his phone out and was reading something with an expression I could not read. The PA clicked on again at 10:26. Mid-sentence it cut. Whatever the voice was saying got swallowed. The silence after it was worse than the silence before. Then the footsteps came back. Closer to our door this time, slower. There was something wrong with the rhythm of them, not a limp exactly, more like someone placing each foot with deliberate care, like they were counting the steps or listening to their own movement. They stopped completely. And then a sound I still think about, low, almost below hearing, like someone exhaling slowly through their nose just outside the door. Marcus put his hand on my arm. He was pointing at the window. I looked. There was a face there just for a second, a man I did not recognize, not a teacher, not one of our security staff. He was older, maybe 50, a rough face, deep-set eyes, a few days of gray stubble. He was wearing a dark work jacket, the kind with the quilted lining, collar turned up, a Carhartt or something like it. He was looking in from the wrong angle. He bent down and was angling his view upward through the lower half of the glass. His eyes were moving, not panicked, methodical, the way you look when you're counting something or looking for something specific. He stayed there long enough that I had time to register all of it, the jacket, the stubble, the angle of his head, long enough to be certain of what I was seeing. He was not moving fast, he was not panicking, he was looking for something. I went completely still. I think everyone near the window saw it happen because the whole back of the room just stopped breathing. Priya, 2 feet to my left, made a single small involuntary sound in her throat and then went silent, like she'd caught herself. Mr. Devlin had seen it too. He stepped away from the lab bench and moved between the door and us without saying a word. He reached back and picked up the wooden stool from behind his desk. He held it in both hands, one at the seat, one gripping the nearest leg. He stood in front of the door, feet set apart, every muscle in his body rigid, shoulders up, jaw set, watching the window the way you watch something you are prepared to respond to. That was the moment. That was when I knew. A drill doesn't make Mr. Devlin pick up a stool. The footsteps stayed outside our door for what felt like 4 minutes, maybe less. Time moves differently when every second is something you are actively surviving. A girl named Priya had her hand pressed over her mouth. Marcus had his eyes closed. I kept watching that window. The slice of hallway stayed empty, just the beige wall, the fire extinguisher mount, that strip of floor. The face didn't come back. At some point the footsteps moved away, down toward the gym wing, slow and uneven, fading, then gone. The silence they left behind was somehow worse than the silence before they'd arrived. We stayed in that back corner for another 40 minutes. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Mr. Devlin did not put the stool down for a long time. When he finally set it aside, he didn't explain why he'd picked it up. He just sat on the edge of his desk and watched the door. His hands were open on his thighs. I noticed they weren't entirely steady. At 11:08, the PA came on again. This time it was Mrs. Alderman. Her voice was steady, but only just. All clear, staff, please resume normal class activities. That was it, all clear. 3 hours later, my mom picked me up. The district had sent a message to parents around 11:30. It said there had been an unauthorized individual on school grounds, that the situation had been resolved, that all students were safe, that law enforcement had responded. It did not say who the man was. It did not say how he got in. It did not say what he wanted or where he'd been found. The local paper, the Clarion Gazette, ran a small piece 2 days later. A man had been detained near the building. A trespass complaint, no charges named. The district superintendent was quoted saying the school's safety protocols had performed as expected. As expected. I thought about that phrase for a long time. Our safety protocols had a code yellow in them that I had never heard, that nobody I talked to had ever heard, which means somebody at that school knew what it meant. Somebody built it into the protocol and never told the students. I asked Mr. Devlin about it the following week, just the two of us in the room before the bell. I asked him what code yellow meant. He looked at me for a second, then he said, "It means the situation is closer than they thought." I didn't ask anything else. A kid named Danny Sr. ran cross-country, had his locker 2 down from mine, didn't come back to school after that week. His parents pulled him and enrolled him somewhere else. I heard it through Marcus, who heard it from Danny's girlfriend. Danny never posted about it. His social media just went quiet. I've thought about that a lot, about what Danny might have seen that I didn't, about which hallway he'd been in, which room, which window. The district maintained that the situation was minor, an unauthorized individual quickly contained, no students harmed, no staff harmed. The school's response was appropriate and effective. Maybe that's true. But Mr. Devlin picked up that stool, and he is a man who grades lab reports with a rubric and spends the first day of school explaining the reason behind every safety procedure in his classroom. He is not a man who acts on instinct. A man who acts on pure reason picked up a wooden stool and stood between his students and a door for almost 40 minutes without once putting it down. I'm 24 now, I work in Pittsburgh, nothing to do with schools. I drive past Route 208 sometimes when I'm visiting my parents. I still flinch when a PA clicks on.